Welcome to King County Connects, a program where we connect you with the important issues in King County. I'm Enrique Cerna. How do we prevent domestic violence? The King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is reaching out to the Latino community with a domestic violence awareness campaign. Prosecuting Attorney Dan Satterberg is here along with Consejo's Executive Director Jaime Garcia. They're joining us today to talk more about this campaign. Well, Dan, let's start first with the issue of domestic violence. I heard a statistic that it's like 1 in 4 women are a victim.
The statistics show that even though crime is going down generally, that domestic violence remains one of our largest public safety issues. Here in King County, 1 out of 3 murders every year is a domestic violence murder. We have more than 11,000 reported crimes, and we know that it's vastly underreported. So domestic violence remains a huge issue here in King County. It affects public safety, it affects public health. We know it affects children later on in life. I mean, we know too much about domestic violence to ignore it.
In the prosecuting attorney's office, tell me about the unit and how you go about in dealing with these cases.
A couple of years ago, we decided to combine our misdemeanor prosecutions with our felony prosecutions. We have a single unit that handles all domestic violence cases because probably in no other area is there less importance between the misdemeanor and the felony, because today's misdemeanor could be tomorrow's homicide. And we're focused on safety planning for victims. We have a team of advocates who works with victims. We also have a team of people who help women with protection orders. Anyone who wants to walk in our courthouse here in Seattle or down in Kent, doesn't have to be a case that we've charged. If you're living with somebody and you're afraid, we can help you get a protection order.
Are more women stepping forward?
I think that we've done a pretty good job culturally of informing women that they have options, that they don't have to sit there and take it. Where I think that we need to do more is to make domestic violence a man's issue. You know, over 93% of the cases that we prosecute involve men as defendants. And the cases that involve women, often they're retaliating against property, or maybe it's a different family member we charge. But overwhelmingly, domestic violence, as we understand it, it's a guy's thing. And it always irks me a little bit to hear domestic violence treated as a woman's issue. It's not a woman's issue. It's a guy's thing. Having said that, most men don't engage in domestic violence, would never think about it. Yet somehow we sit quietly while our brothers and our sons and our uncles and our friends act in such a way and talk in such a way to perpetuate domestic violence. So what we're hoping by raising this awareness is for men to step up and say, you know what, it's not okay. It's unacceptable to hit a woman.
I want to talk more about that, but you know, as we talk about this being a man's thing, one of the things that's happening is, as we mentioned here, you've been reaching out to the Latino community, and Jaime Garcia from Consejo is here. Jaime, I know that is a part of the work that you do. Consejo, works with addiction issues, mental health, but it's very much become a big part of what you do.
That is absolutely right, Enrique. We look at behavioral health involving mental health, chemical dependency, and now domestic violence. A number of the women that come to us are suffering issues of mental health and maybe some substance abuse as a result of the domestic abuse.
So they all combine. I mean,
they combine together,
part of that.
And they yes.
Let's talk about this as a cultural issue. I want to get back to the male thing, but the fact is that when we talk about the Latino community, I think that there has been a cultural aspect of this where it has been accepted that a man would physically assault his wife or girlfriend. And that's got to be a tremendous challenge to try to break down that barrier.
Well, Enrique, I see it that this is the vergüenza, the shame of our community. But I've also realized that all communities, regardless of ethnicity, socioeconomic, or geographic area, there's domestic violence. In our community, maybe because of the distribution of socioeconomic wealth, we may be more in the public system, more out front. But the Latino culture and machismo is an issue of protecting women, protecting la familia, protecting one another. We have many proud traditions, but one of them is not harming our spouses or our girlfriends or our daughters.
Now, one thing that has happened is a public service campaign that has involving the prosecuting attorney's office as well as Consejo and in trying to reach the community in Spanish. Let's take a look at a spot that was produced, and it really is aimed at men. Take a look.
El amor de un padre crea confianza. Nuestros padres nos enseñan dignidad y respeto. Ser parte de una familia es intervenir cuando alguien está siendo abusado. Esto es lo que hacen los hombres, nos protegen. Tenemos muchas tradiciones hermosas. La violencia contra la mujer o un ser querido no es una de ellas. Juntos podemos detener el ciclo de la violencia. No se queda callado, su llamada es confidencial.
Well, tell me more about the idea here with that spot. Again, it's reaching out to men and that man issue in trying to, I think, culturally reach them.
Yes, I think I earlier spoke about how our culture has many proud traditions, but one of which is not violence. It really talks about taking responsibility. It really talks about the confidentiality of being able to speak out. A number of our people that we serve at Consejo are undocumented, and there might be a fear of going to the prosecuting attorney's office or to the police. We have to tear away that stigma and give them access to know that this has got to stop, that immigration won't be called, and that this is a crime that must be prosecuted and dealt with quickly as possible.
How did this come about, this kind of partnership and working together?
I think that we realize that if we're ever going to get to our goal of eliminating domestic violence, that we have to reach out to every community, and particularly ones where there may be some mistrust of government. And we need to find the right messengers with the right message to start saying that this is not okay. And so the Latino community is an obvious one to start with. We're also working with young kids. We have a program that we've incorporated from a national program called Coaching Boys into Men, where we've worked with some coaches of young men on basketball teams, lacrosse teams, to start a culture of saying, you know, the coach, it starts with the coach. We respect the coach, respect the elder in the community. To say, you know, I respect men who respect women. And on my team, it's not going to be okay for you to use derogatory terms to talk about women. It's not going to be okay for you to brag about your sexual exploits, because that's not what real men do. So it's about changing culture from the top, from authority, from people in positions of power, but then you have to get peers as well who will also reinforce that message.
I mentioned I wanted to come back to talking about the male issue and all of this, because you brought that up in the very beginning. And the fact is, we live in a world where there is this sense of the way men use language toward women, the way that men can be physical and all of that. We have a tremendous, I think, wall there to get over to try to change, which is a cultural perception. I would think that would be very difficult.
And Enrique, I think that's true of all men, especially of our generation that were raised. We have an obligation to model and show the way to our children, to our grandchildren, and to show what has to happen. We, at one of our transitional housing, a confidential shelter in South King County, have groups for the children, because it's a learned behavior. What happens is a man may see his father or his grandfather committing this crime, and it's accepted because, you know, it's a secret, and we have to break that. And I think by getting down and educating the boys through programs like Dan was talking about, through groups, through any leadership role we can, and bringing it out in the open. I think as long as it's a secret behind closed doors, people won't talk about it, and we have to stand up and take responsibility.
And in our culture as Latinos, the fact is that there is a machismo thing that goes on. It probably is in all other cultures. It's the same type of problem as well, which makes another challenge in trying to deal with this.
And I was chatting with some of the staff about machismo. And machismo sometimes gets a bad rap of being very bad and negative, but the same machismo is the father that holds his young daughter in his arm. The same machismo will open the door for his 92-year-old mother. The same machismo will walk on the outside of the street for his wife to be on the inside, an old Latino culture. So we have to realize, capture the good part of it and deal with the old tapes, the old messages that get in the way from us being truly the men that we are meant to be. Our culture's changing immensely. Our culture is changing very, very quickly as we assimilate and acculturate, and we have to realize we have to change with the times.
When you prosecute cases like this, do you ever look for ways that where you could help the person that is making the mistake of attacking a woman or being physically violent?
We've been, for years, struggling with what's the right outcome of a misdemeanor case. So there hasn't been a serious injury, but maybe there's been a pattern of abuse. And what's the outcome? What should the court sentence this person to make them realize that this is not okay, to look inward at their response to tension and anger and stress. And I don't think we've developed the perfect treatment yet for this, but we're still working on it. It's a variety of ways to get men to realize that they are responsible for their feelings and for how they act on their feelings. And it's not anybody else's fault. It's completely within their control. So there's a little cognitive behavioral therapy nugget that is what we're trying to do. But to me, the more promising arena, frankly, is to work on promoting a culture where it's unthinkable. It's not just unacceptable, it's unthinkable to hit a woman. That's where we start with the young boys. And I think that's our hope, that they can be raised, because it is learned behavior, as Jaime says, but it can be unlearned.
And I think it's the prevention piece. My directors of programs at Consejo has been looking into the literature, and it's not very good for treating people who have done domestic abuse. It's very unclear. What is good is we have to go upstream and get that prevention piece, teach them that it's unacceptable, and proceed from there. I'm not saying we're giving up on the perpetrators. We have to deal with them because they're part of our society, but recognizing a lot more in prevention is going to pay a lot more dividend.
And we don't want young boys to think that just because their dad did it, that they're destined to do it too. They can
break
break that cycle.
Break the cycle.
And what about in dealing with the women and getting them to come forward? Because obviously one of the big challenges is language.
Yeah. I learned early in my career it takes 7 times a woman maybe to break that cycle of domestic violence. 7 times. I don't know if we're getting her on the first one or the 7th one. We have to give her all the opportunities. The language, we have bilingual, bicultural advocates that meet with them in their homes. We have, I said, a 23-unit domestic violence shelter. We have another 4-bedroom home in which we have people at. We're part of a network in King County. We're blessed to have a very supportive county government and city government to fund these type of things and be able to move women into safety. But having people come forward, there's fear of immigration, deportation. The women may be undocumented, but their children are born here in the United States. The perpetrator will use that pool of children that if they talk to the police, they're going to take the children away. So there's lots of ties. There's a religious overlays. It's very complicated. But with an advocate that can help unpeel that, and years of counseling and therapy, they can break the cycle, they can get independent, and they can be safe.
How does your office handle the situation when you may have a woman who is a victim of domestic violence and finally get her to be able to come forward to, take some action, but she's undocumented?
We have a program where we can apply for what's called a U visa through the federal government. So any sort of cooperating witness who has a questionable immigration status, who works with the police and the prosecutor, we will vouch for them. It's a process where I think it's back in Vermont or something, there's an office that approves those, but we can actually help somebody gain a more stable immigration status because they have cooperated with us. So it's designed to overcome some of this. Now, educating people about it, making people trust it, that's what we ask groups like Consejo to help us with.
Obviously, your office says you have made this a priority as a prosecuting attorney. Is enough being done on the state level? Is enough being done on the national level? Politically, some of these issues get kind of tied up in knots with ideology and politics.
I can't really worry about the things that happen outside the boundaries of King County right now. We're trying to make sure that our community has a comprehensive response to domestic violence. And I understand that the criminal justice role may be that big, but the community role has to be much broader. It has to start with prevention. It has to support victims. It has to encourage victims to consider their options. Reporting to police may not be the right thing in every case, but there has to be a safe place for that victim to be able to go and confide to. And then the criminal justice system can get involved, but then there has to be help after our process. So it's a full response, and our piece is important, but it's small. And what's more important is that the community acknowledges that this is an issue and has systems in place to deal with it.
Enrique, good examples. We have 11 contracts with local government for our domestic violence program. In addition, we have some private foundation money. Those contracts involve some federal money, some state money, county and city of Seattle money. But I would say that the core funding is with the county funding. Really helps build that program and able to go from there. And it's matched with some local dollars. The challenge is that, like my mental health funding, we get primarily through the state RSN system. The substance abuse is also through the county and the state, a couple grants. The domestic violence is piecemealed all over. It makes an administrative challenge. They could be in larger amounts from the federal government is what I believe.
When you became King County prosecutor, I mean, you were already in the office anyway, but was there anything a particular case that really stood out for you that, you said, this has to be a priority for us?
I've been in the office for 28 years, and I started off doing misdemeanors, and domestic violence was part of my caseload back then, and I realized right then how ill-equipped our system was back in 1985, particularly to deal with women who needed help. And I'll never forget having a woman knock on my door after hours were closed at the Auburn courthouse, and she'd been beaten up, and I had never seen a woman who'd been beaten up. I lived in a very peaceful home, and she was black and blue, and she was in desperate need, and I had never felt so helpless as that moment. What can I do to help you? I did not know. Today I would know, and today our deputy prosecutors would know, and we have a network. We could have referred her to someplace. I was ill-equipped, and I don't want anybody to be in that position again. When somebody asks for help, they've summoned up the courage to come to the system and say, I need help. We better respond, and we better respond every time in the best way we can.
Any stories that you can tell us, Jaime, about the women that have gone through your programs, have been treated, that have managed to rebuild their lives?
There's so many, but one that stands out is at our annual event where you received our Founders Award. One young lady spoke about sexual abuse and domestic violence and how she was able to get into transitional housing through our program to get the assistance, the counseling, which was critically important, then get the U visa, then to get the Section 8, then to get into college at Bellevue Community College, and then to go on to build her life and to be more successful, and now volunteering back at Consejo. That's one of the success stories. It really resonates with me. Another one, maybe not so successful, that one of the clients that out there was in the mental health system through a sister agency. We were housing them, and there was substance abuse involved. Again, those three agencies, those three issues coming together, and we as social service agencies can't look at the person just as a domestic violence case or mental health or substance abuse. We have to look at the whole person, and we need to do a better job. So we're looking at behavioral health.
Right. And going forward here now, where's the emphasis? Is it part of this effort of reaching out to the communities and more public service efforts?
It's on every part of the continuum. I mean, our legal system response has to be there, our community response for victims has to be there, but where I think to plant the seed for the next generation, it's time to start saying, men, this domestic violence is your issue, and your first job is to teach the young men in your life, your sons and your nephews and the young men that you coach, to treat women with respect, and that it's no laughing matter, and that it's very serious, and that you respect men who respect women, and that's our message.
And it can make them better men, let's face it.
Well, so what we're doing is we're doing some research. We have a PhD candidate from the School of Social Work doing research that's looking at the incidence of domestic violence on undocumented girls and the incidence of domestic violence in their life. We need to develop best practices, write it up, and be able to publish it widely, because our community is growing so largely, not just in Seattle or the Southwest or the East, everywhere. And we believe we're getting some practices that are promising to address this very issue.
All right. Jaime Garcia, Consejo, and Dan Satterberg from the King County Prosecutor's Office, King County Prosecutor. Appreciate you taking the time to discuss what is a very important issue. And I think you're right. It's about us men getting our act together and realizing how we can help those coming behind us to develop better attitudes and to really step up about this issue. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of King County Connects. Please visit us online at kingcounty.gov/KCTV. I'm Enrique Cerna. We'll see you next time.